5 years of marriage to Adrian Shaw, and I had never once touched the world he kept encrypted. Not really. There was a number he gave me early on, a string of digits so precise it felt less like a phone number and more like a lock. He called it the only safe channel, the only door that would always open if I ever needed him, a door that only ever hovered in front of me, shimmering like a mirage. Close enough to haunt, never close enough to enter. Adrian was the Central Intelligence Bureau's sharpest field operative. In the internal files, he wasn't described like a man. He was described like a myth. Codename Black Dragon, a creature that lived in shadow, that could twist light and night into weapons. It fit him too well. Remote, cold, impossible to hold. When he was deployed, every signal around him was jammed. Civilian lines became static. The world turned into white noise. Except, supposedly, that one channel. I used to believe that if I ever stood at the edge of life and death, all I would have to do was press those digits, and he would tear through the dark to find me. I clung to that belief the way people cling to prayer, until the night his trainee hit me with her car, and my last illusion was crushed into the wet asphalt. It began with the 53rd time I dialed the encrypted number. The receiver filled with one sound only. Busy, long, cold, mechanical, cutting into my eardrum in the exact same rhythm as the 52 times before it, over an entire year. I wasn't calling a man at all. I was pressing my palm against permafrost, stubbornly waiting for it to melt, until my skin went numb and my hope turned blue. The old ivory landline sat on my bedside cabinet like a museum piece, spotless, obedient, lifeless. The bedroom was arranged in a style everyone called cozy: beige curtains, warm lamps, a wedding photo on the wall. But if you looked closely, you'd notice something missing. Me. The bookshelf held his files, the shoe cabinet held his shoes. The desk held his classified folders locked in black cases with hard edges and harder passwords. I lived here like a guest who didn't want to leave fingerprints, stepping softly as if the floor itself belonged to him and would report me. Outside, rain ticked at the window in patient little taps, stretching into smeared rivulets that made the busy tone feel louder, like someone was amplifying his silence on purpose. The digital clock glowed 11:17 p.m. Adrian had been out of contact for 17 days. The last message he sent me willingly was on the 3rd of last month, short as a telegram. On assignment, return date unknown, don't miss me, don't miss me. 2 words frozen on my screen like a final order handed down to our marriage. I had obeyed every rule he ever set, except that one. Not because I didn't try, because I couldn't. I hung up hard. The busy tone vanished, but what replaced it was worse. The room filled with the sound of rain striking glass, cracking apart, falling into the wooden floor as a kind of emptiness so complete it made panic feel reasonable. For 5 years, the thing I did best was wait. Wait for calls that never came. Wait for his silhouette to appear in the doorway. Wait for an explanation, even a careless one. And I learned, very quickly, how to live with the invisible loneliness that creeps into corners when you've been quietly excluded from the world of the person you married. His missions were marked top secret. A single call from a superior, and he could disappear for months without a trace, as if Adrian Shaw didn't exist in civilian life at all, leaving only the shadow named Black Dragon. In the beginning, I worried myself sick. I slept with my phone in my hand. Every vibration, every soft buzz, made my heart leap like it was trying to escape my ribs, terrified I would miss a single syllable that said, "I'm alive." Eventually, I was forced to understand something I never wanted to. His world had orders. Iron discipline, advanced systems, national secrets and threats that required blood as payment. But there was no space in that world for me, not even enough space for a call. That encrypted number was supposed to be his safest channel during assignments. Never blocked, always prioritized. Yet, on my end, it behaved like it had been modified. Like my calls were placed into the one category that would always be refused. As if from the very beginning, he had placed me on the one list where the signal would never be accepted. The rain suddenly grew heavier. I stood to close the window, and that was when my personal phone rang. Not the landline, not the ivory relic. My own phone, glowing in the dark like a startled eye. An unfamiliar number. My chest tightened. For one irrational second, hope rose in my throat like a drowning reflex. Maybe he had to use a different line. Maybe. My finger trembled as I answered. Hello. A man's voice, young and professional. The rhythm of a work call. Courteous, but distant. Not him. The disappointment that sank into my chest wasn't relief. It was a hollow drop so sharp, my mind blanked for a beat. Yes, I managed. Who is this? Miss Lynn? I'm Adrian's assistant. Finn. The Milky Way necklace Mr. Shaw ordered for you has arrived. When would be convenient for me to deliver it? The Milky Way necklace. It took me a few seconds to remember. 3 months ago, my birthday. Adrian was home, rare as a meteor, sitting on the sofa with a file open, eyes never lifting from the page. I was on the other end of the couch, scrolling aimlessly, when I saw a jewelry design and blurted out, half joking, half wishing, "It's beautiful. If someone gave me that, I'd cry." He had hummed, non-committal. I forgot it the next day, like I forgot so many small hopes that didn't survive the climate of our life. He actually ordered it, and yet, the first thing I felt wasn't surprise or joy. It was disgustingly complicated. Bitter, heavy, like a bandage placed neatly over a wound no one ever cleaned. "Miss Lynn?" Finn prompted gently. I heard my own voice, calm to the point of unfamiliarity. "Thank you, but don't bring it." A pause. "You mean, return it? Or handle it however you like," I said, still too steady. "Wait until he's back, then decide." Finn hesitated. This piece was custom made. Cancelling may require his approval. "Then wait for his approval," I said, and ended the call. I stared at the dark screen in my hand. The necklace was probably stunning. I knew that, but I didn't want a gift that felt like calculated compensation. A purchase made to complete a duty, to paste over the gap his absence left behind, like a polite apology sent by courier. If I stayed in that house, surrounded by his traces but missing his presence, I would go insane. So I grabbed my coat and my car keys and left. The roads were slick. Rain turned streetlights into halos, blurred and bleeding. I drove without direction, wipers sweeping away sheets of water in steady strokes. The radio played soft love songs. Every lyric felt like salt rubbed into rawness. I wanted to turn it off, but I was too tired to reach. And then, at a junction leading toward the mountains outside the city, something pulled my hands. I turned. The road climbed into darker terrain, fewer cars, sparse streetlights swallowed by rain. It led toward the Intelligence Bureau's internal residential area, a secure compound closed to outsiders. Adrian had an apartment there, a place he sometimes slept between missions. I had never been there. He never allowed it. "Strict security," he said. "Even if you come, you won't get in. You'll just make things harder." But tonight I wanted to see it. Even if it was from far away behind a fence, I wanted to know what the place looked like where he sometimes stopped, the place that belonged to him more than our home ever did. The mountain road was a ribbon of wet blackness, curves stacked on curves. My hands tightened on the wheel. I eased off the gas. At the third sharp bend, headlights exploded into my windshield. blinding white. So bright my eyes screamed. A red sports car came down from above at insane speed, tires sending water up like a wave. Instinct took over. I yanked the wheel, slammed the brakes. Too late. Impact. A violent crash into my side. My car lurched, spun. Airbags detonated in an instant, punching my face, my world flipping into chaos. Metal screamed against the wet road. And then I slammed into a guardrail, with a sound that felt like the night itself cracking. When everything stopped, silence rushed in like water. I sagged forward over the wheel, ears ringing, vision swimming. My cheek burned as if someone had slapped me with fire. The chemical scent of the airbag filled the cabin, thick and choking. It took a long time for my breathing to return. Outside, the red sports car looked barely damaged. A minor dent, a scratch on glossy skin. My car was caved in, twisted like something disposable. The sports car door swung open. A young woman stepped out in a short, fashionable dress, high heels clicking on wet asphalt. She approached my window and rapped on the glass impatiently, as if I was late for an appointment. I lowered the window. Cold wind and rain slapped my face. What kind of driving was that? She snapped, voice sharp, aggressive. This is a curve. You're supposed to yield to oncoming traffic. Do you even know the rules? I almost laughed from pure fury. You were over the line, I said, jaw tight. And you flashed your high beam straight into... She ignored me, eyes flicking over my ordinary family sedan with open contempt. Whatever. I don't have time. How much do you want? Name it. I'm in a hurry. Her tone made it sound like she hadn't hit a car with a person inside, like she'd bumped into a trash bin. I shoved my door open and stepped out to argue, and pain detonated in my left ankle. White hot. A drill through bone. My knees buckled. I grabbed the door to stay upright. When I looked down, I saw a long gash on my calf, blood mixing with rain, sliding into my shoe. Oh, she said, folding her arms with a sneer. Now you're going to pretend you're hurt? I have a dash cam. I inhaled slowly, forcing calm into my voice. Call the police. Let them handle it. The moment I said police, her expression flickered. A brief discomfort, a shadow crossing her eyes. Then it vanished behind arrogance. No need to bother the police. She lifted her wrist. A black watch. Rugged, futuristic. Her finger pressed a side button. The face lit with pale blue. Symbols flashed across it, sharp and unreadable. She leaned close to it, and her voice turned sweet, almost coy. Coach, she said. I had an accident. Third bend on the mountain road. Someone here looks injured and keeps following me. It's annoying. Come handle it for me. Please. Her eyes met mine on the last sentence, deliberate and gleaming with display. Coach. My heart missed a beat. A bad premonition slid along my spine like a cold snake. Rain struck harder, pounding on metal like war drums. From far away, a deep engine growl rose through the dark. Not a police siren. Not an ambulance. Something heavier. Something predatory. A blade of white light cut through the rain. And then, a massive black vehicle tore into view, angular and brutal, like an armored beast. It braked hard, skidding slightly, stopping across the slope like a steel wall. No logos, no ordinary plates, just smooth, terrifying cleanliness. The air around it seemed to hum with distortion, faint electromagnetic ripples that made the rain shatter into mist when it touched the vehicle's skin. The side door opened. A man jumped down. Fast, controlled, efficient. My lungs forgot how to work. Black tactical gear fitted a straight, powerful frame. Gun belt, ammunition, combat knife, everything placed with discipline. A smear of dried blood streaked his shoulder down his arm, stark under the headlights. His lower face was hidden behind a matte black mask, but his eyes, the eyes I had woken to for 5 years, the eyes that haunted my sleepless nights, replayed in dreams. No matter how much darkness he wrapped around himself, I could not mistake them. Adrian, my husband, in the stormy night where he was on assignment, signal blocked. A single press of that woman's watch had pulled him here. He came, but he didn't even look at me. The moment his boots hit the ground, he moved straight to the red sports car and the girl who had just hit me. In his hand was a folded blast shield. He snapped it open in one motion, placing it in front of her, like he had done it 1,000 times. As if I was the threat, as if my dented car behind me was danger. He bent, urgency written into his movements, in a way I had never seen directed toward me. He checked her hands, her arms, her legs, gloved fingers careful, almost tender. His gloves were still stained dark with blood. Rain spread it into ink. Whose blood was that? His? Someone else's? In that moment, it didn't matter. Because in this rain, the only thing that mattered to him clearly was not me. Why didn't you execute emergency protocol and withdraw? His voice was low, tense, threaded with worry and reprimand. Do you have any idea how dangerous this was? She pouted and raised her wrist, letting the watch glow between them like a private signal. I pressed it. See? You came so fast. Adrian's shoulders loosened slightly, the barest exhale of relief, but his voice stayed strict. Nonsense. The life monitor flagged your heart rate as abnormal. I thought. I didn't hear the rest. Something inside my skull roared, like a hive of bees waking all at once. Life monitor. Abnormal heart rate. So when he said he was unreachable, he wasn't cut off from the world at all. He had a separate system. A private channel. A device that would scream red the second the person it was linked to was in danger. And that system had never been linked to me. Not once. It belonged to her, to his trainee. While I sat through countless nights waiting by phones like a fool, pressing that encrypted number like it meant anything, I was never inside his network. I had been waiting outside a locked door that was never meant for me. Lightning split the sky. Blue-violet light flashed across my windshield, reflecting my face, pale and ruined. Rain and blood slid deeper into my shoe, icy as poured water. And yet I barely felt my leg. The only pain I could truly feel was the soundless crack in my chest as something finally broke. 2 more men in matching black tactical gear stepped out of the armoured vehicle. They moved like trained machines, scanning, photographing, measuring, beginning to process the crash scene with practiced precision. They passed me as if I were air. Not one glance, not one question. I was an invisible obstruction standing in a place I wasn't supposed to exist. The girl stayed behind Adrian's blast shield, peeking around the edge. Her gaze flicked to my bleeding leg, paused for exactly 1 beat, then her lips curved. Quick enough that, if I wasn't fluent in contempt, I might have thought I imagined it. But what glittered in her eyes was sharp as a needle, sinking straight into skin. "Coach," she murmured, adding a tremble like a performance. I was terrified. "Thank God you came." Adrian's hand settled on her shoulder, a familiar gesture that made my stomach drop. He had done that to me before. On the rare nights he came home and I woke from nightmares, he'd placed his hand on my shoulder and patted softly until my breathing slowed. "It's okay," he had said then. Tonight, he said it to her, and only then, at her sweet reminder, did his gaze finally slide toward me. Through meters of rain, his eyes were colder than I believed possible. Not a husband looking at a wife, an officer assessing an unknown civilian. Calculation, impatience, the faint irritation of someone whose forbidden perimeter had been breached. "Ma'am," he said, voice flat and distant. "Do you require medical assistance?" "Ma'am." 3 letters that hit like ice dumped down my spine. He didn't call my name. He didn't call me Claire. He didn't even call me his wife. He called me ma'am. I opened my mouth, but my throat locked. No sound came out. My fingers dug into the ruined metal of my car door until my knuckles went white. I stared at him like a starving person staring at bread behind glass, idiotically hoping I'd find something in his eyes. A flicker of confusion, a startled blink, a crack in his mask. Nothing. His gaze didn't move, calm as dead water. As if in his real world, I truly had no right to be here. No right to see him like this. No right to stand on the border between his darkness and the light he'd never allowed me into. The girl tugged lightly at his sleeve. "Coach, she looks like she's in shock. Maybe we should take her to the hospital." Her words sounded considerate. Her eyes tasted like poison. "After all," she added softly, "I did hit her." Adrian frowned, weighing something invisible, then turned slightly and gave a short order to the man nearest him. "Handle it." "Yes, sir." The operative approached me with steady steps, professional pressure in every movement. "Ma'am, we will transport you to the nearest hospital," he said, emotionless and unyielding. "As for the accident, a designated team will contact you." "A designated team?" I laughed. A stiff, ugly sound. So Adrian wasn't going to ask me anything. Not even a careless, "What are you doing here?" To him, I was no different than the bent guardrail behind me. Damaged. Inconvenient. Something for someone else to process. The operative lifted his hand to support me. I flung it away. The motion pulled at my injured leg. Pain surged like fire, my vision darkening for a second. I gripped the mangled car door, fingers biting into cold metal to stay upright. "No," I said. My voice came out raw, strange. And yet there was steel in it I didn't recognize until I heard it. "I'll deal with my own problem." Adrian's eyes held on my face for exactly 1 second longer. A brief surprise, perhaps, at my resistance. Then it was gone. "Fine," he said, already reclaiming calm. "All compensation will be paid." And he turned away. He leaned down toward the girl, speaking low, his words swallowed by rain. Her gaze said everything without opening her mouth. "See? The only person he cares about is me." Then they walked to the armoured vehicle together, rain plastering Adrian's tactical gear to his broad back, the back that had sheltered me once. Now it burned into my vision like a brand. The door shut with a hard metallic thud. The engine roared. The black beast vanished into the storm without hesitation, leaving only white spray and the faintest echo of heavy power, leaving me behind, alone in wreckage, alone under rain like needles, alone on the shattered remains of a heart that had been dead for years, but only now admitted it. Warm liquid slid down my cheek. Rain, blood, tears. I couldn't tell. I fumbled my cracked phone out of my pocket, the fractured screen reflecting my ruined face in jagged lines. I scrolled to the encrypted number again, the one that had never truly connected, and called. This time I didn't hang up early. I stood in the rain and listened to the ring tone as if I was listening to my own final heartbeat, until the cold, automated voice said, "The number you have dialed is currently unreachable." I ended the call, and I smiled. A small, broken smile. "So you thought tonight was just an accident?" I whispered into the storm. "You're wrong. From the moment he chose to ignore me, from the moment he shielded another woman and threw me aside like expired property, the rules changed. 5 years I had clutched a marriage that existed only on paper. clutched a phone line that never opened, clutched promises with no dates. Tonight, under this rain, I finally understood. It wasn't that he couldn't receive my signal. It was that I was never the person on the other end of his line. I was done. I leaned against the guardrail, metal cold against my spine, blood soaking my pant leg. My fingers shook as I opened my contacts. This time, I didn't call the encrypted number. I didn't call Adrian. I scrolled to a name I had saved long ago and never thought I would touch. A name that meant one thing only. If I pressed it, my life would tilt onto an entirely new axis. I pressed. The call connected quickly. A man's voice answered, low and steady, roughened like a habit of late nights and cigarettes. "Who is this?" I inhaled, swallowing the ache in my throat, forcing my voice into businesslike clarity. "This is Claire Lynn," I said. Then I paused, driving a stake into the ground with the next words. "I accept your offer. Let's cooperate." Silence for 2 seconds. The kind of silence where you can picture someone lifting an eyebrow, interest sparking in their eyes. Then the voice returned, the faintest edge of concern beneath the control. "Miss Lynn, are you all right?" "I'm fine." I cut in, nails digging into my palm until pain sharpened my focus. "Just had an incident." I chose the words. "I was hit by a car." His tone turned instantly hard. "Where are you?" "Mountain Road. Third Bend," I said, glancing at the blurred sign through the rain. "Near the Bureau's residential compound." "I'm sending people now," he said without hesitation. "Not yet," I said, and my gaze drifted toward the direction the armored vehicle had vanished. "Just arrange somewhere quiet for me." Then my voice lowered, turning cold. "And don't let him know." I didn't need to explain who he was. The man understood. "Understood," he said. 10 minutes. The call ended, and the rain kept falling, relentless, as if the sky was trying to erase evidence. But it couldn't erase what I had seen. Adrian Shaw had come for another woman, and when I needed him most, he chose to look through me like I was nothing. He used the word ma'am and the promise of compensation to crush 5 years of waiting into dust. In the distance, headlights approached, smoother than the armored beast, quieter, controlled. 2 black luxury sedans slid to a stop in front of me, like answers arriving on cue. Doors opened. Men in black suits stepped out, moving with disciplined speed. The one in front raised an umbrella over my head, creating a temporary dome of safety. "Miss Lynn," he said, respectful. "I'm Leo, Mr. Kane's assistant. He sent us to pick you up." Mr. Kane. Damien Kane. The man whose name didn't appear in headlines, but appeared in every private financial ledger worth fearing. A man the Bureau labelled a special interest target. A man Adrian's world watched carefully. A man I had met only a handful of times, always at my weakest moments, always with perfect timing. And now, in the rain, with blood in my shoe and betrayal lodged in my chest, I was stepping into the world Adrian had kept me out of, not as a wife waiting behind a locked door, but as a woman choosing a side, because if Adrian wanted to pretend I was a stranger, then I would become one, and I would do it so completely that one day he would look up and realize the name he erased from his system had learned how to build her own. Past chat, past chat, past chat, past chat. Lena's voice came back through the line, low and heavy now, the playful edge gone. "I know a senior from my program," she said. "He's a shark in this field. He specializes in divorces with complicated backgrounds, sensitive assets, sensitive identities." A pause. Then carefully, "But Vivienne, Ethan's status is special. Divorcing him won't be easy." "I know," I stared at my own reflection in the window glass. Pale skin, hollow eyes, a face that looked like it had been left out in the rain too long. "That's why we need evidence," I said, my voice almost flat, like I was reading a checklist, not dismantling a life. Evidence that can bury him. Evidence that drags him down from that untouchable pedestal of his code name, his rank, his myth. I began listing them, one by one, evenly, as if the words didn't taste like iron. Abuse of authority for personal matters during an operation. Inappropriate involvement with a trainee whose background is complicated. Covering up a traffic incident with internal power. Abandoning his legal wife in a dangerous situation. Every single one. I said softly. I'll remember it for him. On the other end, Lena's breathing slowed, turned deliberate. "Understood," she said. "I'll handle the attorney." Then more urgently, "Where are you right now? Are you safe?" "I'm safe." I didn't give her the address. Not out of mistrust, out of instinct, out of survival. I'm somewhere Ethan would never think to look. I ended the call, and it felt like the last thread holding my body upright had been cut. My legs gave first. I slid down onto the thick carpet, my back against the freezing glass. My stitched calf throbbed in pulses that matched my heartbeat, each beat tugging the wound open again from the inside. But the pain in my leg was nothing. The real fire was in my chest. 5 years. The best years of my youth poured into a marriage that was more like a waiting room with locked doors. And what did I get in return? I let out a quiet laugh. The sound sharp between my teeth. "I should have fed it to the dogs," I muttered. Then, colder. "No, dogs at least wag their tails for their owners." Ethan Ward. My smile was thin enough to cut. "You're not even as loyal as a dog." The next morning, knocking dragged me out of sleep. Sleep wasn't the right word. I'd spent the night sinking in and out of fractured images, Ethan's eyes behind the mask, Daisy's victorious smile, the way ma'am had landed on my skin like a slap. "Miss Lynn?" It was Leo Lee's voice, careful and respectful on the other side of the door. "Are you awake?" "Mister, Shen is here." My calf screamed the moment I tried to sit up. I swallowed it down, forced my body to obey. In the mirror, I looked like someone who'd survived something she couldn't explain. To polite society, bandage across my forehead, shadows under my eyes, my mouth drained of colour. Still, I combed my hair back, smoothed my clothes, pulled on a cardigan with hands that refused to stop shaking. If I was going to sit across from Adrian Shen, I would not do it as a wreck. I would do it as a woman who had finally made a decision. Downstairs, he was waiting on the living room sofa, tea in his hand, morning light painting him in soft gold, as if he belonged to a calm world. White shirt, sleeves rolled to the forearm, grey trousers, straight posture, gentle, scholarly composure. If you didn't know his name, you might have mistaken him for a professor about to lecture on macroeconomics. But men who made governments keep dossiers didn't become that kind of dangerous by accident. "Miss Lynn." He set the cup down and stood. His gaze flicked, just once, to my limp concern measured to the gram. Not too distant, not too intimate. "How's the injury?" he asked. "Still painful?" "Less than last night," I replied, taking the seat opposite him. "Thank you for arranging everything." Breakfast arrived: porridge, warm milk, delicate dishes meant for the wounded. The smell was gentle, but my throat refused to open. Adrian lifted his hand slightly. Leo and the staff withdrew without a sound, leaving the room to the two of us and the ticking clock that suddenly felt too loud. "Did you get any rest?" Adrian asked, pouring milk into a glass, as if it were the most ordinary morning in the world. Then he looked at me fully, eyes dark and still lake water at midnight. "Miss Lynn," he said, no preamble. "You told me you were ready to cooperate. What changed your mind?" The warmth of the glass did nothing for my cold fingers. "Aren't you the one who already knows?" I asked. His brows lifted a fraction. I met his gaze without flinching. About Ethan and his special trainee, Daisy. Adrian didn't deny it. "I've heard rumours," he said carefully. "But those were still your private matters." "Private?" A thin, humourless curve pulled at my mouth. Last night, the person who hit me with her car was Daisy. Something in Adrian's hand paused so small you could miss it if you didn't watch like you were looking for cracks in armour. "Coincidence," he said, voice even. "It wasn't," I replied, my tone turning to ice. "She did it on purpose." I told him the facts. The sports car crossing lanes on the mountain bend. The high beams flooding my windshield like a deliberate blade of light. The impact. The blood. The rain. Then Daisy tapping that black watch, cooing into it like she owned the world. And minutes later, an armoured vehicle ripping through the storm. Ethan leaping out, deploying a blast shield for her like muscle memory. Not once looking at me like I existed. I didn't dramatise it. I didn't cry. I didn't beg for sympathy. I simply laid it on the table like evidence in a case file. Adrian listened the way powerful men listen when they're deciding whether an earthquake is useful. When I finished, he placed his cup down with care. Eyes narrowing slightly. So he murmured, "Mr. Ward truly isn't normal about this trainee." "Not normal isn't enough," I said. I lowered my gaze. Lashes hiding the churn in my eyes. "Miss Lynn." Adrian leaned forward, voice dropping. "How far do you want to go?" I looked up again. This time, there was no tremble in my stare. "I want a divorce, and I want him to pay using everything he cares about. His position, his reputation, and his temple," I said, my fingers tightening in my lap until my nails bit skin. "That career he worships, that codename he thinks makes him untouchable. The Black Dragon." I let the words settle, heavy and final. "I want to destroy it." Adrian held my gaze for a long moment. Then he smiled. Not mocking, not greedy. It was the smile of someone who had been waiting for a door to open and finally heard the lock click. "Good," he said quietly. He stood and walked to the window, hands behind his back, sunlight sharpening the edges of his profile. "Ethan Ward is capable," Adrian said, "but his weakness is obvious. Arrogance, faith in his own control, and..." His eyes slid back to me, the faintest curve at his mouth. A disastrous inability to separate duty from desire. My phone felt heavier in my pocket, as if it already contained the next move. Adrian's voice remained calm, almost gentle. "If you're serious, Miss Lynn, then we start like this. We don't rush. We don't scream. We let him believe he's won." I kept my expression blank, but inside something shifted like a blade sliding into its sheath. "I'm not rushing," I said. "I'm beginning." Adrian nodded once. "Then tell me what you need." I turned toward the staircase, toward the room where I'd hidden the encrypted drive, the one that sat in my bedside drawer like a quiet death sentence. "I need," I said slowly, "a meeting that looks accidental." Adrian's interest sharpened. "Time and place?" "Next Wednesday," I answered, every word deliberate. 42nd floor, Autumn Pavilion. The restaurant I booked every year for Ethan's birthday. 8 times out of 10, he never showed. This year, I wanted him there. Not to celebrate, to witness. Adrian's voice was smooth as silk over steel. "And who is the person you want to run into?" I smiled, small, cold, precise. a man who's exceptional. And, most importantly, I said, tasting the satisfaction like bitter wine, exceptional enough to make Ethan feel threatened. Adrian's breath was almost a quiet laugh. I understand, he said. I'll arrange it. When the call ended, the villa felt too quiet. The world outside looked peaceful, trimmed hedges, polished stone paths, a soft fountain glow like a trapped galaxy. But inside me, the storm had stopped being chaos. It had become direction. I limped upstairs, opened the drawer, and stared at the black drive again. Daisy had called him teacher like it was a claim. He had called me ma'am like I was a stranger. Fine. From today on, we would all play our parts. He could keep pretending to be the righteous man swallowed by duty, and I would be the obedient wife who smiled, apologized, and quietly dug the ground out from under his feet, one clean, silent scoop at a time. I walked out of the bathroom and returned to the dining room. The food on the table had gone cold. Grease had congealed into a dull film, the kind that made you lose your appetite just by looking at it. It looked exactly like my marriage, still intact from a distance, still arranged like something respectable, but dead underneath dead, for so long that even the corpse had begun to harden. I stepped up to the table without expression and began clearing it plate by plate, scraping everything into the trash. With every dish that hit the bin, it felt like I was throwing away another year. Another stupid, tender, delusional year. All of it gone. From today on, the Vivienne Lynn of the past 5 years was officially dead. The woman left behind was only a shadow that could breathe. A shadow with one purpose. Revenge. Ethan Ward. Daisy. What you owe me. I'll collect it. Every last cent. Principal and interest. The following days were unnervingly calm. Ethan was busy, truly busy. Out before sunrise, back after midnight, sometimes not home at all. When he did return, he brought different worlds with him on his skin. Sometimes it was gasoline and salt air, like he'd been near a port. Sometimes antiseptic, sharp and clinical, like he'd walked through a medical bay. Sometimes a faint ghost of gunpowder. And sometimes there was something else. A perfume so light it was almost innocent sweet fruit. A hint of citrus, white blossoms, youthful, addictive. The kind of scent that smiled at you from a distance and sank its teeth in when you got close. A woman's scent. Not mine. I acted as if I didn't smell it. I ate on schedule, took my medication, rested, healed. I became exactly what he expected, a small bird with a broken wing, quiet in its cage, grateful for the bars that kept the world out. When he came home, I played the role with meticulous care. I would limp slowly to the door and take his coat, hang it gently. I would ask softly, "Are you tired? Hungry? Do you want me to warm up some soup?" I would brew tea and set it on the table beside him when he sat on the sofa with documents, letting the steam rise like a veil to hide my eyes for a second too long. I kept a warm lamp lit on the shelf, always. So when he returned late, the house wasn't only darkness and silence. I even began sending him harmless texts, little things I'd never dared to send before. Back when I still believed my needs were an inconvenience. "It's raining again. Bring an umbrella. I made soup. If you come home tonight, drink some. It'll keep you warm." Most of them vanished into the void. Occasionally, he replied with a single word. "Okay," or something colder. "Don't wait up." And somehow, I didn't feel disappointed. Because this wasn't love. This was erosion. Quiet. Persistent. Water, wearing down stone. I was numbing his suspicion, training his instincts to accept my presence again, to accept the idea that Vivienne was still the same, still soft, still dependent, still the wife who swallowed every grievance and never dared to complain. My leg healed slowly. When the stitches came out, the skin pulled back together and left a pale pink scar, crooked, ugly, like a worm crawling across my calf. Every time I saw it, I remembered the rain that night, and the way Mam had fallen on me like a blade. The cut on my forehead faded too, the bandage removed, leaving only a faint red line. I covered it carefully with foundation and concealer until there was no trace left. In the play I was about to perform, every detail had to be flawless. During that time, Lena sent me the contact information for a lawyer, one of the top divorce attorneys in the country. He handled wealthy families, complicated assets, sensitive backgrounds, especially cases involving special positions. I had a long call with him. On the phone, I explained the situation calmly. I hid Adrian Shen's existence. I hid everything that came after. I emphasized only one thing. I want a divorce as soon as possible, I said. And I want the maximum protection and benefit I'm entitled to. The lawyer was silent for a moment, then spoke with a professional neutrality so precise it felt like a scalpel. Mr. Ward's status is unique. The process may take a long time. The procedures will be complicated. You will need strong evidence that the marriage has irreparably broken down, or that the other party committed serious wrongdoing. A pause. Then, more delicately, and if his work falls under special marital provisions, it becomes even harder. I gripped my phone and leaned against the window ledge, staring at the sunlight spilling across the garden like it belonged to someone else's life. Evidence, I said evenly. I'll find a way. When I ended the call, the sky outside was clear. The leaves were deep green. The breeze was light, but inside my chest, a lake had frozen solid. Evidence. Soon, very soon, time blinked, and the day before Ethan's birthday arrived. That evening, unbelievably, he came home early. His face looked more exhausted than usual. A tight tension sat between his brows, irritation barely contained, like he'd just walked out of a messy situation he couldn't fully control. I greeted him like I always did now, took his coat, hung it up. Have you eaten? I asked gently. Do you want me to warm the soup? No. He rubbed the bridge of his nose without looking at me and sank onto the sofa, eyes closing as if the room itself was too loud. I poured warm water and placed it on the coffee table. You're really tired, I said, voice soft enough not to disturb him. He answered with a low sound that might have been yes. I stood there for a second, hesitating like I had to gather courage. Tomorrow, I said carefully. It's your birthday. His eyes opened slowly. In that first look, I saw something faint and blank, as if he'd genuinely forgotten. His response was so flat it barely counted as a response at all. I booked the table, I continued, watching him. The usual place. I kept my tone tentative. Tomorrow night. Will you be free? That restaurant, the one by the glass wall overlooking the river, was the place we went our first year after marriage. One of the rare times he'd actually shown up. After that, it became my ritual. Every year I booked the same table. 8, 9 times out of 10, he never came. But I kept booking it anyway. Like devotion could force the universe to cooperate. Ethan's brow tightened slightly, as if he wanted to say something. And then his phone vibrated. That special urgent ring, sharp, relentless. I didn't need to look at the screen to know. Daisy. A flicker of softness crossed his eyes. The corner of his mouth almost lifted. Then he forced it down and returned to his neutral mask. He picked up the phone but didn't answer immediately. He glanced at me. We'll see tomorrow, he said, cold as wind skimming over water. No ripple, no warmth. Then he stood and walked toward the study, answering the call as he went. The door wasn't fully closed yet when Daisy's voice floated out, sweet, bright, intimate in a way that had no business being inside my home. "Teacher, I don't understand a few parts of tomorrow's briefing. Are you free right now?" Ethan's voice softened instantly. "Send it over," he said. "I'll take a look." The study door closed. The sound was quiet, final. I stared at it until my eyes ached. A slow smile moved across my lips, thin, cold, without a hint of warmth. "We'll see tomorrow," I whispered to the empty space. "Ethan Ward, you won't have a tomorrow anymore." The next afternoon, I dressed carefully. I chose a soft blush dress, the kind he'd once said, "suited you and makes you look brighter." He'd probably forgotten those words. I hadn't. My makeup was light, elegant, each line deliberate, hiding every trace of sleeplessness. The woman in the mirror looked gentle, proper, the kind of wife who had learned to stand behind her husband like a shadow. But if you looked deep enough into her eyes, you'd see it something sharp and cold, a decision carved into bone. At 4 o'clock, Adrian Shen texted me a single word. "Ready." At 5:30, I left the house and took a car to the restaurant. On the way, I typed a message to Ethan. "Ethan, I'm here. I'm waiting for you." Sent. No reply. Exactly as expected. At 6 on the dot, I walked inside. The hostess smiled and led me to the window seat I'd reserved. Outside, the river glittered with sunset and city lights, a curtain of gold and neon. I ordered lemon soda and took slow sips, letting the sharp cold bite my tongue and anchor me to the present. Time passed. Ethan didn't come. No call. No apology. Nothing. 7 o'clock. 7:30. The sky darkened completely, neon reflections trembling on the water like shards of glass. A pianist played soft, romantic music. Around me, couples laughed quietly. Glasses clinked. Footsteps whispered over carpet. Everything was beautiful. Everything was staged. And the chair across from me remained empty. Twice, a server approached politely. "Would you like to order, ma'am?" I smiled, perfect, rehearsed, effortless. "Just a little longer," I said, embarrassed in the exact way a devoted wife should be. My husband must be stuck in traffic. At 8 o'clock, my phone lit up. Finally, a message from Ethan. Mission. Can't make it. Eat without me. No sorry. No warmth. Not even a single softened word. Clean. Decisive. The way he disposed of anything he didn't want to deal with. I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I set the phone down, inhaled, and dialed another number. Not his. "Hello?" A man's voice answered smooth, calm. "Mr. Chen?" I smiled. "This is Vivienne Lin." My tone didn't waver. "Are you here yet?" "I'm right outside the entrance, Miss Lin." "Then I'll have them bring you in." I ended the call and lifted my hand slightly. A few minutes later, a man in a light grey suit was guided to my table. Tall, broad-shouldered, clean-cut, gold-rimmed glasses. A refined kind of handsomeness, the kind that looked like doctors or professors in expensive magazines. His presence was warm without being intrusive, confident without being arrogant. "Miss Lin," he greeted with a small, respectful nod. "Tristan," I said, standing to welcome him, offering an apologetic smile. "I'm sorry to keep you waiting." "No trouble," he replied easily. "I just arrived." Menus came. We spoke like two adults meeting for dinner. Art, travel, food, city projects. Tristan Chen was good, too good. His conversation flowed naturally, as if it had been designed, but never sounded rehearsed. He knew when to lean in, when to retreat, when to let silence breathe. Around us, the mood softened. It looked perfectly like a date. And while I smiled and nodded, I watched the entrance through my lashes, just enough to notice, without seeming to watch. Adrian had told me Ethan's operation was nearby, and that it had ended. So where was Ethan now? Writing a report? Returning to base? Or calming his precious Daisy after the excitement, praising her, steadying her, making sure she felt safe? Whatever it was, the odds of him passing through this area were high, and what I needed was simple. I needed him to see me. On his birthday, after abandoning his wife sitting by the window, across from an attractive man, smiling under golden light, like a perfectly framed betrayal. The dishes arrived. We ate. I listened to the piano, to Tristan's gentle laughter, to the hum of romance around us. But my senses stayed taut, waiting for something else. A familiar step, a certain pressure in the air, or that instinctive tightening in my bones that whispered, "The prey is close." Near 9 o'clock, a small ripple of commotion spread from the entrance, like a stone dropped into still water. My fingers tightened around my knife and fork until my knuckles paled. But my face remained composed. My smile remained mild. I kept my eyes on Tristan as if I were genuinely captivated by his story. And through the corner of my vision, I saw him, Ethan Ward. He wasn't alone. Daisy walked beside him in a simple white dress, fresh and clean like a flower that bloomed at night. Her hand rested on his arm with casual ownership, her smile bright, her eyes curved up as she spoke animatedly. Ethan's face held no obvious expression, but his gaze looked looser than it ever looked at home, almost peaceful. The two of them looked like a matched pair, a celebrated team, a golden duo. Something cold squeezed my heart. For 1 second, then hatred swallowed the pain whole, sharper than any blade. Perfect timing. Ethan's gaze swept the room with practiced awareness, quick, efficient. The way he scanned environments out of habit. And then his eyes stopped. On my table, on my face, then slowly on the man sitting across from me. I watched Ethan's jaw tighten, watched his eyes darken into something dangerous and raw. Daisy saw me too. Her smile froze for a beat, then shifted into something else, curiosity, amusement, a thin edge of challenge. She tightened her hold on Ethan's arm like a claim. Ethan strode toward us. Fast, direct, no hesitation. The tables he passed seemed to fall quieter, conversations thinning as his presence lowered the temperature of the room. Tristan was still facing away from the entrance, unaware, wiping his mouth with a napkin. "Miss Lynn," he said gently, "their lava cake is excellent. Would you like to try it?" That was when Ethan reached the table. I looked up at the exact moment he stepped into our light. I let surprise bloom on my face, controlled, believable. A hint of panic, a hint of embarrassment. "Ethan," I said, voice trembling just enough. What are you doing here?" The restaurant didn't go silent, but it might as well have. The piano kept playing, but everything else felt distant. Eyes turned. Whispers started. Ethan stood beside the table, his shadow swallowing mine. His gaze swept over me, first cold, then pinned Tristan sharp, hostile, stripping him down with the blunt aggression of a man who believed he owned what he was looking at. Daisy stood close to Ethan, a little too close, her posture effortless like she belonged there. Only then did Tristan turn. He looked at Ethan, surprise flickering into polite confusion. He stood up, composed, and offered a courteous greeting. "Sir," he said, "and you are?" "I'm her husband." Ethan's voice was low, lethal, each word ground out like steel against stone. Tristan's face registered the right kind of shock, perfectly timed. He glanced at me, silently asking for context. I stood too, hands twisting together, eyes lowered, posture tense, the portrait of a woman caught. "Ethan," I said quickly, "didn't you say you had a mission? That you couldn't come? So you immediately found another man," Ethan said, cold smile carving his mouth, "to eat dinner with on my birthday." His eyes flicked to Tristan again with open contempt. "Who is he?" "This is Tristan Chen," I answered before Tristan could, letting my voice sound vague, protective, like I was trying to cover something. "A friend. We ran into each other. It was just dinner." "Ran into each other?" Ethan gave a short metallic laugh. "At the restaurant I always use. On my birthday, at the exact hour, I said I couldn't come. What a coincidence." He stepped closer to Tristan. Two tall men squared off, the air between them drawn tight like a wire ready to snap. "Mr. Chen," Ethan said, voice dropping further, the threat no longer hidden. "What exactly is your relationship with my wife?" Tristan adjusted his glasses calmly. "Mr. Ward," he replied, steady. "I believe you've misunderstood. Miss Lin and I are just friends. Tonight was truly incidental. If this makes you uncomfortable, I apologize." Ethan didn't believe him. He turned sharply, eyes blazing, and locked onto me. "Vivian Lin," he said, the words like a command. "You will explain. Now." I flinched just enough. My eyes reddened, tears gathering at the rim, the perfect mixture of fear and grievance. "Explain what?" I whispered, voice breaking. "I waited until 8. You sent one message telling me to eat alone. I sat here like an idiot in public while everyone watched me get stood up." I lifted my chin, tears trembling but not falling, and looked at Daisy standing at Ethan's side with that bright, interested expression, like she was watching entertainment. "Do you really mean I'm not allowed to have a friend beside me? Or," I let the implication sharpen, no longer subtle, "is your mission tonight dinner with someone else?" Daisy's expression flickered. For a second, the mask slipped. Then she smiled sweetly and tightened her hold on Ethan's arm. "Teacher," she murmured softly, as if soothing him, "don't be angry. Maybe Mrs. Ward was just lonely." It sounded like peace. It was gasoline. Ethan's face hardened further. "Watch your words," he said to me. "My words?" I laughed through the tears, bitter, exhausted. "Ethan, what exactly are you angry about?" "Angry because I'm not sitting at home like a good, obedient wife, waiting all night for a man who doesn't show up? Or angry because you brought someone with you so you can't tolerate seeing me with anyone at all?" The restaurant's whispers grew louder. The story wrote itself in strangers' minds. A furious husband, a young, beautiful woman on his arm, and a wife seated across from another man. Tristan spoke then, voice calm but clear. "Mr. Ward, this is a public place. Please consider your image. If there's a misunderstanding between you and Miss Lin, it's best handled privately. Please don't make this harder for her." As he spoke, he shifted slightly, just a small movement, a protective angle in front of me. That tiny gesture was the spark. Ethan snapped. He shoved Tristan hard. Tristan stumbled into the neighbouring table, glasses clattering, a sharp crash, a couple gasps. Ethan's voice dropped into something glacial. "What happens between me and my wife is none of your business." Then he grabbed my wrist. Hard. So hard the bones screamed. "We're leaving," he said. "Ethan, let go," I gasped, pain jolting through my arm. "You're hurting me!" Real tears spilled this time. Tristan stepped forward instinctively. "Mr. Ward, please." Ethan turned his head, His eyes were not the eyes of a husband. They were the eyes of something trained, something weaponized. "Get out of my way!" The words weren't loud. They were final. Tristan stopped. Not cowardly, just aware enough to understand the danger. As Ethan dragged me past Daisy, I caught Daisy's mouth lifting with satisfaction. Her lips moved without sound. 2 words I read perfectly. "Serves you right." Something inside me locked into place. No softness left. No illusion to preserve. Ethan shoved me into the passenger seat of his vehicle. The door slammed before I could pull my seatbelt. He started the engine like it was a punishment. The car shot forward. Streetlights blurred into streaks. Signs and traffic pulled backward like the world was being ripped away from me. Ethan's hands strangled the steering wheel, veins raised on his knuckles. His face was dark enough to bleed. Inside the car, the air was so dense it felt like breathing through cloth. I leaned my head against the window, wrist burning, skin already swelling under his grip. I didn't cry. I didn't speak. I watched the city slide past like a life being dragged away without permission, and in my chest there was only emptiness. Cold, clean, hollow. Good. The masks were ripping off now. That meant we were close to the truth. The car braked hard at the villa. Ethan got out and yanked open my door, hauled me out by the arm, almost pulling me off my feet. The front door slammed behind us with a thunderous crash. He released my wrist like he'd touched something dirty. I staggered, steadied myself, lifted my eyes and looked straight at him. No flinching, no fear. "Vivienne Lynn," he said, my name ground into pieces between his teeth. "You will give me a reasonable explanation." Explanation? I rubbed my bruised wrist slowly and smiled, cold, sharp, merciless. "What do you want me to explain? That I refuse to sit alone like an idiot until midnight, or that Tristan Chen exists?" I stepped closer, one small step, deliberately narrowing the space between us. "And what about you?" I spoke carefully, each word aimed like a blade. "Do you owe me an explanation? Your mission tonight was that dinner with Daisy, on your wife's birthday reservation, while you left me sitting in public like I didn't exist." Ethan's eyes flashed with something like guilt. It was gone in a heartbeat, buried under anger. "My work," he said, voice heavy, "is none of your business." "Right." My laugh was dry. "I have no right to interfere with your work." "But what about my life?" The words rose, carrying 5 years of swallowed humiliation. "Am I not even allowed to eat with a male friend?" "Friend?" Ethan scoffed. "That kind of man, one look, and you can tell he has intentions. And you call him a friend. Do you think I'm blind?" I almost laughed at the hypocrisy. "Telling," I said, eyes fixed on his. "When you say that, do you not feel ashamed? What exactly are you and Daisy?" "Teacher and student. Pure, superior and subordinate." That question hit him like a boot to the throat. His face went grey. He stepped in and clamped his hand around my jaw, forcing my chin up. The pressure was brutal. "Vivienne," he said, voice vibrating with contained violence. "What nonsense are you talking about?" But behind the anger, I saw it. A sliver of panic. Not because I was wrong, because I was close. "I'm talking nonsense." I spoke through the pain, eyes unblinking. "Then answer me. She has a watch that can call you directly. Her vital signs are linked to your device. I call you no answer. She presses a button, and you appear like a god in armor. What kind of teacher-student relationship looks like that, Ethan?" His breathing thickened. His grip trembled. "Work requirements," he hissed, as if repeating the phrase could make it true. "Daisy is a priority trainee. Her safety is important." "Oh!" I smiled, slow and cruel. "Work requirements. What a beautiful excuse. Then I cut through the last layer of costume and said it quietly, clearly, without mercy. Tell me, Ethan, what kind of work requirement needs you to sign an abortion consent form for her? The room went dead. His hand dropped from my face as if it had been burned. The fury on his features vanished in an instant. Wiped clean by shock, he stared at me like he couldn't process the words. Then he spoke hoarse, instinctive, and fatal. How do you know about that? That one sentence, that one question, was a confession. Something fell inside me silent, heavy, final. The last pathetic fragment of hope I hadn't admitted to myself shattered into dust. So it was real. Every page Adrian showed me, every signature, every date. Real. I looked at Ethan, this man whose face I once knew better than my own, and watched his fear surface raw and exposed before he could hide it. How do I know? I repeated softly, almost amused. You think you can bury things like that forever? Ethan stumbled back a step and leaned against the cabinet by the door, avoiding my eyes like a guilty man caught in a bright room. Vivienne, his voice cracked. Listen, it's not what you think. Not what I think. I moved closer, forcing him to meet my gaze. Then tell me what it is. Did Daisy force you to sign? Was the baby not yours? With each question, his face paled further. His silence was the only answer I needed. I exhaled a laugh that had no humor in it. Ethan, I said, voice flat. You make me sick. For a moment he looked as if I'd stabbed him. Vivienne, let me explain. He reached for my arm. I jerked away like he was rotting. Don't touch me. That rejection killed the guilt in his eyes. In its place rose the thing he always returned to when he felt cornered. Control. Authority. Command. Yes, he said, voice dropping into ice. I signed it. At the time, the situation was special. She had no family. I was her instructor, her direct superior. Superior? I shouted, the rage finally ripping free. Tears spilled now, not from heartbreak, but from humiliation and disgust. What kind of superior signs an abortion consent form for a subordinate? Do you think I'm stupid? I pointed at him, finger shaking. When did it start? When I waited at home, night after night like a fool. When my calls vanished into blocked signals while you were somewhere holding someone else. You used marriage to lock me down. And you were sleeping with your trainee. Maybe you even got her pregnant. What am I to you, Ethan? A shield, a curtain, a pretty legal label to hide your filth behind. He couldn't answer. His mouth opened, closed. The living room filled with nothing but his uneven breathing and the relentless ticking of the clock, counting down like an execution. I drew in one deep breath and said the word that ended everything. Divorce. Ethan froze. For a second, he looked like someone had ripped the air out of his lungs. Then the denial slammed in, instinctive and violent. No. His voice came out like steel. I will not agree to a divorce. I stared at him. Strangely calm. You don't need to agree. This marriage is ending. I will hire the best lawyer. I will expose everything. And I want to see how long your precious title, your precious myth survives when the truth touches it. The word expose struck something deep in him. His eyes darkened into a dangerous void. He stepped toward me slowly, like a predator deciding whether the bite was necessary. You think you can threaten me, he said. Each word low and heavy. So what? I replied, lifting my chin. What will you do? Kill me? Like you handle targets on your missions? That landed. I saw it just a flicker, a weakness, a human crack. Then it was gone, and the mask returned cold, calculating, unfamiliar. You think you can find evidence? He said with quiet contempt. With you alone? His gaze sharpened. Without my permission, you won't step outside this door. The threat was blunt, not hidden, not dressed up. A cage built with one sentence. A chill slid down my spine. Because I knew him. If Ethan said it, he meant it. With his reach, his channels, his leverage making me disappear wouldn't even require violence. It would require paperwork. A call. A sealed file. But I had already crossed the point of return. So I looked straight at him. Steady as ice. And I smiled. Go ahead, I said softly. Try me. Pass chat. 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 I looked at my reflection one last time, letting the dark velvet settle against my skin like a second shadow, then answered in a voice that sounded calmer than my pulse. I remember, I said. Protect myself. Don't let emotion drive. Every word, every glance has a purpose. Good. Julian's tone stayed light, but it was the kind of lightness people used when they were walking across thin ice. Your driver is already outside. If anything feels wrong, you don't improvise heroics. You retreat. You call the safety line. Understood? Understood. He paused for half a breath, then added, almost casually, and Vivian. Yes? Tonight, Adrian will try to make you small again. Not with force, with shame, with the eyes of other people. Don't accept the role he assigns you. I felt something cold straighten inside me. I won't. The call ended. For a second, the room went very quiet. No villa, no locked doors, no heavy footsteps behind me, just the soft hum of the air conditioner and the faint tick of a clock that sounded like a countdown. I picked up the burner phone Julian had given me, slipped it into the inner pocket of my coat, then took my clutch and walked out. The corridor outside the suite was warm, carpeted, expensive in that way that tried to make you forget you were being watched. Two men in plain clothes stood near the elevator, pretending to look at their phones. They weren't from Julian. They didn't need to be. I'd lived with Adrian long enough to recognize the posture of people who thought they owned the air around you. I smiled at them like a polite stranger. One of them glanced up, his eyes tracking my dress for half a second too long. Then he looked away as if I was nothing. Good. Let them think that. The elevator doors slid shut. My own reflection stared back at me in the mirrored panel lipstick the color of old wine, eyes lined like a soft threat. I looked like the kind of woman people made room for without knowing why. When the doors opened downstairs, I found Julian's driver waiting exactly where he promised. Middle-aged, ordinary, a face you'd forget as soon as you turned away. He held the door for me without a word. The car smelled faintly of clean leather and rain. As we pulled out, the city lights stretched into long ribbons on the windows, and the night leaned closer, as if listening. The invitation in my bag was printed on thick cream paper, embossed in gold. A charity reception, a fundraiser, a place where men like Adrian wore clean suits and clean smiles and called it virtue. A place where women like Daisy stood beside them and looked innocent while their hands stayed wrapped around the right wrists, the right arms, the right futures. Julian had said I was the director tonight. Directors didn't tremble, so I sat back, crossed my legs carefully, and practiced breathing like someone who had already won. By the time we arrived, the building was bright enough to make the street look poorer by comparison. Glass and marble and warm light spilling onto the steps. Security at the entrance. A red carpet that wasn't really red. Just deep enough in colour to feel like blood without admitting it. The driver stepped out first, opened my door, and I walked up the steps. The The first thing I felt was the weight of eyes. Not one or two, dozens. It hit me the way cold water hits skin, sudden, sharp, impossible to ignore. People turned their heads. Conversations softened. Some smiles froze halfway, like masks caught mid-adjustment. I was supposed to be invisible. Adrian's wife, the quiet shadow tucked behind his reputation. But I wasn't tucked anywhere tonight. I handed my invitation to the host, signed my name in neat strokes Vivian Lynn, and walked inside. Music floated through the hall. Delicate piano layered with strings, the kind of sound designed to make money feel romantic. Crystal glasses chimed. Perfume and expensive alcohol mixed with the clean scent of flowers. And then I saw her. Daisy. White dress. Simple. Pure. A soft colour meant to convince people she had never stained anything in her life. She stood near a column wrapped in orchids, laughing lightly at something one of Adrian's colleagues said, her hand resting too naturally on Adrian's forearm, as if it belonged there. Adrian wore a black suit that fit him like authority. His hair was combed back, his posture steady, his expression composed. The truc long everyone admired. The man who pulled me by the wrist like I was furniture. His gaze swept the room the way it always did, automatic, trained, searching for threats. And then it landed on me. For a fraction of a second, the control cracked. It wasn't rage yet. It was something uglier. A calculation. What is she doing here? Who let her in? How do I contain this? Daisy followed his line of sight. Her smile faltered, then brightened again immediately. Sweeter than before, like sugar poured over a knife. She leaned closer to Adrian and murmured something. Her fingers tightened on his sleeve. A subtle claim. Adrian's jaw flexed. He didn't move toward me. Not yet. Because this was a room full of witnesses. Because he couldn't drag me out by the wrist in front of donors and cameras and people who mattered. So he did the next best thing. He waited. He let the room do the work for him. I walked deeper into the reception, as if I belonged there, which, by law, by contract, by the last 5 years of my life, I did. A server offered champagne. I took a glass and didn't drink. I held it for appearance, letting the cold stem steady my fingers. A woman in a pearl necklace recognized me, or recognized my face enough to attach gossip to it. Her eyes flicked over my dress, my lipstick, the way I stood. "Mrs. Tate," she said politely. But the politeness was brittle. "It's been a while." "It has," I answered with a soft smile. "Life gets busy." The word tasted strange. Busy was what people called it when they didn't want to say abandoned. I drifted toward the balcony doors, where the city lights glittered like scattered coins, and the air was cool enough to sharpen thought. My heartbeat slowed into something steadier, purposeful. Behind me, I sensed movement. Not footsteps pressure. The air changing because a predator had decided to close the distance. I didn't turn. I let him come. Adrian stopped at my side, close enough that anyone watching would assume husband and wife sharing a quiet moment. His voice was low, controlled, and sharp at the edges. "What are you doing here, Vivian?" I turned my head slightly, just enough to meet his eyes. I made my expression calm, almost bored. "Attending," I said. "Like everyone else." His gaze dropped to my dress, then lifted again, colder. "You're trying to embarrass me." I gave him a small smile. "If you feel embarrassed, that's your emotion, not my action." His nostrils flared once tiny, but I noticed. I noticed everything now. Daisy appeared 2 steps later, as if summoned. She slipped into the space beside Adrian with perfect timing, perfect innocence, perfect ownership. "Sister Vivian," she said softly, as if the words were warm. "I didn't know you'd come." Are you feeling better? Your leg. Her eyes dipped toward my calf, searching for weakness, for a limp, for any sign she could present to the room as proof that I was fragile. I shifted my weight smoothly. No stumble, no hesitation. Much better, I said. Thank you for your concern. Daisy's smile stayed, but her eyes sharpened like a blade being drawn. Adrian's voice dropped further. We'll talk when we get home. No, I replied, still soft, still polite. Tonight. We talk here. His gaze snapped to mine. The warning in it was immediate. You're crossing a line. I tilted my head. You said I'm still your wife, right? So why does it feel like I'm the stranger at your side, and she's the one you're protecting? Daisy's expression barely changed, but her fingers curled tighter around Adrian's arm. Mrs. Tate, she said gently, this isn't the place. It's exactly the place, I interrupted, and the quiet in my tone made it more dangerous than shouting. Because here you can't grab me. Here you can't drag me. Here you have to pretend you're civilized. Adrian's eyes darkened. Vivian. I sipped nothing from my champagne, simply lifting the glass to my lips and lowering it again, a slow gesture that bought me time and reminded me I controlled my hands. Then I leaned closer, just enough that he could hear me without anyone else catching the words. You told me I couldn't leave without your permission, I said. So I stopped asking. His jaw tightened. And you threatened Arthur, I continued, watching the smallest shifts in his face. So I removed him from your reach. A flicker surprise. Anger immediately swallowing it. Daisy's eyes widened a fraction, then softened again. Sister Vivian, you're misunderstanding. Stop calling me sister, I said pleasantly. The words were light. They landed heavy. For the first time, Daisy's smile slipped, just for a breath, revealing a flash of irritation beneath the sweetness. Adrian looked at Daisy as if to steady himself, then back at me, his tone dangerously calm. Do you want war? He asked, in front of everyone. I smiled. No, I said. I want truth. He laughed once, without humor. Truth doesn't matter, only what people believe. I leaned back and let my eyes drift over the room, over the glittering donors, the camera near the stage, the small cluster of journalists pretending they were only here for the charity. Then I looked at him again, slowly. Then let's give them something to believe, I whispered. His pupils tightened. Daisy's breathing changed tiny, quick, controlled, but wrong. I watched her throat move as she swallowed. Good. Let her be afraid, because fear makes people careless. And careless people leave fingerprints. I turned away first, stepping back into the light of the room, letting the music and laughter wrap around me like camouflage. I walked toward the crowd as if nothing had happened, as if this was all normal. Behind me, I felt Adrian's stare burn into my back, and beside him, Daisy's gaze followed. Sweet as fruit, poisonous as addiction. I didn't need to look back to know one thing. Tonight, the stage was set, and for the first time in 5 years, the spotlight wasn't on him. It was on me. Past chat, 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 past, 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 past. Rain kept drumming on the rusted window frame, steady and merciless, like a metronome counting down what was left of a man's pride. Adrian Shaw sat on the edge of the sofa with his back bowed, one hand pressed hard against his chest, as if he could physically push the ache back into place. The cheap glass on the table still stank of liquor. The carpet still bore that ugly, fresh bloom of blood, too bright against something so worn out, too honest for a room that had been built out of denial. He stared at the news photo until his eyes burned. Vivian Yoon. Not the Vivian who used to wait up with soup warming on the stove. Not the Vivian who used to flinch at his silence like it was thunder. This Vivian stood in a tailored suit, shoulders squared, a calm smile measured to the exact degree of respectable. Beside her stood Julian Chu, not touching her, not claiming her, yet somehow the space between them looked like an alliance sealed in stone. Adrian's throat tightened. He didn't hate Julian Chu. He hated what Julian represented. A door Adrian had slammed shut years ago without realizing he would one day be the one locked outside. His phone buzzed once, short and impatient. A message. No name saved. A number he didn't recognize, which meant he should have ignored it. He didn't. We need to talk. 2 seconds later, another message arrived. As if the sender had anticipated his hesitation. Stop hiding in a rental like a wounded dog. You still owe me. Adrian's fingers went cold. He sat up straighter, pain rippling through his ribs like a warning. Ow was not a word people used, unless they were certain they had a leash. He typed with stiff hands. Who is this? A reply came instantly. East Hall, private entrance, tonight, 10, come alone. Adrian stared at the screen until the letters blurred. East Hall. The phrase scraped across his memory like a blade drawn slow, too familiar, too specific. His chest tightened again, not from the heart condition the doctor had warned him about, but from something older and uglier. He didn't want to go, but fear and pride were twins that always walked together. And Adrian had never been good at refusing either one. He stood, swayed, then steadied himself with the wall. The room smelled of dampness and regret. He hated it. He hated the way it swallowed sound. He hated that it made him feel small. He grabbed his coat and left without turning the light off. Outside, the rain slapped his face like punishment, and he walked into it anyway. Across the city, the lights were clean. The glass walls of the charity venue reflected a world that looked expensive enough to be safe. Soft music, a restrained crowd, cameras kept at a respectful distance by security that didn't smile and didn't need to. Vivian stood behind the curtain for 3 heartbeats longer than necessary, breathing in the quiet like medicine. Ready? Dr. Tristan Chen asked softly. He looked out of place in a suit, too composed, too sharp-eyed, like a man who had learned to wear gentleness as armor. He wasn't here as a doctor tonight. He was here as someone who understood that survival sometimes needed witnesses. Vivian adjusted her cuff, then lifted her chin. I've been ready for years, she said. And for once, it wasn't a lie she told to comfort herself. Julian Chu approached from the side, one hand in his pocket, the other holding a thin folder that looked harmless until you remembered paper could ruin lives. They're on schedule, he said, voice calm. No surprises so far. Vivian's gaze flicked to the folder. And if there is a surprise? Julian's expression didn't change, but something colder moved behind his eyes. Then we let it happen where we can see it. Vivian gave a quiet, almost humorless laugh. You sound like you're talking about weather. Julian leaned slightly closer, just enough that only she could hear him. Storms don't become dangerous because they exist, he murmured. They become dangerous when you pretend the sky is clear. The curtain shifted. A staff member nodded. Showtime. Vivian stepped out into the light. The room turned the way rooms always did when people sensed a story behind a face. She could feel the attention brush against her skin. Curiosity, calculation, admiration that might flip into cruelty if she gave them the right angle. She didn't. She smiled small, controlled, and delivered her speech like a blade wrapped in silk. She talked about protection orders and legal aid, about the quiet kind of violence people don't photograph, about how reputation is often used as a weapon, and how shame is the chain that keeps victims from running. She didn't say Adrian's name. She didn't need to. Every person in the room who knew anything about power understood exactly who she was describing. When she finished, applause rose polite at first, then fuller, as if the crowd had decided it was safe to approve of her. Vivian thanked them, stepped back, and let the lights move away. Behind the curtain again, her breath left her in a trembling exhale. Tristan handed her water. "You didn't shake!" Vivian's fingers tightened around the glass. I shook on the inside. Julian held out his phone. "We have movement." Vivian's eyes narrowed. "From her?" Julian nodded once. Grace Shen resurfaced for 30 minutes online. A private message sent to an account we've been monitoring. Then she disappeared again. Vivian's stomach tightened. Not with fear, she'd exhausted fear a long time ago, but with that cold clarity that always arrived right before the next round began. "She's panicking," Vivian said. "She's not panicking," Julian corrected. "She's adapting." Vivian looked at him. "Same thing. Different perfume." Julian's mouth curved faintly, not quite a smile. "We also received a ping from a number that hasn't been active in months." Vivian's eyes sharpened. "The intermediary." Julian's gaze held hers. "Yes." The word landed like a chess piece placed softly on wood. Vivian's heartbeat didn't speed up. It slowed, measured itself, like her body understood the difference between danger and opportunity. "Where?" she asked. Julian turned the phone so she could see the location. East Hall. Private entrance. 10 p.m. Vivian's lips parted slightly. Not surprise. Recognition. Tristan swore under his breath. "That's where you said outsiders come and go without being logged." Vivian's voice was quiet. That was the place he thought he could play invisible. Julian closed the folder with his thumb. "Tonight, we don't stop him from walking into the room," he said. "We stop him from walking out clean." Vivian stared at the location, and a memory rose like bile. The chandelier light, the champagne smiles, Grace's laughter sharp as needles, Adrian's eyes angry, tired, still convinced he was entitled to control the story. For a moment she could almost hear his voice again, hoarse with rage. "If you touch her." Vivian's jaw tightened. He'd said it like she wasn't a person, like she was a tool that could be threatened into silence. She lifted her gaze to Julian. "What's the plan?" Julian spoke like a man reading the rules of a game he'd already memorized. "You don't go near the entrance. You don't expose yourself. You only appear where you're supposed to be on camera, in the right light, with witnesses. My people take the back corridors. Tristan stays with you." Tristan opened his mouth, clearly about to argue. Vivian glanced at him. "I'm not asking you to babysit," she said. "I'm asking you to be my anchor." Tristan's expression softened, then hardened into resolve. "Then don't do anything reckless." Vivian's smile was thin. "Reckless is what I used to be when I thought love was a shield." Julian watched her for a beat too long, as if he was measuring something he never allowed himself to want. Then he said, 10 p.m. East Hall. We end the last illusion tonight." Vivian's phone buzzed in her clutch. An unknown number. She didn't hesitate this time. She answered without speaking. Silence, thick and deliberate. Then, a voice low, scraped raw. Familiar in the way a scar is familiar. "Vivian. Not Mrs. Shaw. Not Officer Yoon. Not any title he could use to cage her. Just her name." It hit her like a hand closing around the back of her neck. She didn't flinch. "Speak," Vivian said calmly. On the other end, Adrian swallowed like he was trying to swallow a fire. "Don't go to East Hall tonight," he said. Vivian's eyes lifted to Julian's. Julian's expression didn't change, but his hand tightened slightly on the folder, knuckles paling. Vivian's voice stayed steady. "Why?" Adrian's breath rasped. Because you don't know what you're stepping into. Vivian's mouth curved with something that wasn't humour. Adrian, she said softly, the only reason I'm alive is because I learned what I was stepping into years ago. A pause. Then his voice, strained, almost broken. They're not going to protect you the way you think. Vivian's gaze did not move. I'm not asking anyone to protect me, she replied. I'm making sure no one can bury me again. Her fingers tightened around the phone. 10 p.m? You said? Adrian went silent. Vivian lowered her voice until it became a blade-honed fine. Tell they something for me, she said. If they wanted me quiet, they should have killed me properly the first time. She ended the call. For a second, the air behind the curtain felt too thin to breathe. Tristan stared at her. That was him. Vivian slid the phone back into her clutch with slow precision. Yes, she said. Julian's voice was quiet. He's being pulled. Vivian looked toward the stage, light bleeding through the curtain seam, and for a heartbeat she saw herself years ago small, waiting. Then she blinked, and that girl vanished. Good, Vivian said, and her calm was more frightening than anger. Let him be pulled. She lifted her chin. Tonight, we don't chase him. Julian's eyes narrowed slightly. What do we do then? Vivian's smile returned, gentle enough to pass as grace, sharp enough to cut steel. We let him lead us, she said. Straight to the people he's been protecting. And in her pocket, the recording device quiet, patient, waited like a mouth that never forgot a single word.